The employment picture here in the U.S. is beginning to improve, but at a pace that's excruciatingly slow. Just part of what's driving the overall disappointment among those looking for jobs. Well, here with a look at the underlying trends in that dismal portrait scenario is Professor Bill Rodgers, Chief Economist at Rutgers University. Thanks for joining us again, Bill.
My pleasure.
Let's talk about what's beneath, what we talked about earlier in the show called underemployment.
Well, to get to that, we have to first make sure we understand, right, the official unemployment rate that the Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes once a month. We talked about it a few weeks ago. Sits at 8.1%. So that's basically, of all those people who are actively searching or either employed, it's about 8% of the labor force.
Right.
But the problem has occurred is that we had this horrible recession, and now we've had what I call a sort of pothole recovery or bifurcated recovery, where we're only averaging, in terms of private sector job creation, around 110, 120,000 new jobs per month. And that's barely enough to kind of keep the unemployment rate steady.
Right.
And so what that has caused is it's caused people to only be able to get part-time employment, but they want full-time employment.
Sure. And
and that's basically at an all-time high since the Labor Statistics Organization has been collecting those numbers. Now what happens is when you include those people into your unemployment rate calculation, instead of 8.1%, and it's been falling during the last few months, we have an unemployment rate of about 15%.
Wow. But politicians can use the numbers any way they want, because we hear this 8.1%, well, unemployment is going down, but you also have people who just stop looking.
Well, that's
who
right.
now aren't a part of that measurement.
Exactly, and that's what this, when you get to the 15%, when you add in these people who are working part-time but want full-time work, and you also get to that 15% when you add in another 2 million Americans who make up what we call this sort of discouraged worker, plus a set of people who they have stopped searching over the last 4 weeks, because that's the key for how you define as you're unemployed.
Right.
Is that you've been actively searching over the last 4 weeks. And so if you include those who've stopped searching, but they'll tell you, I want a job and I'm ready and willing to work, it's another 2 million Americans. And so that gets you this 15 to 16% unemployment rate.
Wow. So it's worse than we're hearing, is what
well,
you're saying.
it's you know, I worked at the Labor Department, worked with the BLS officials, Bureau of Labor Statistics officials, and I think they've got it right. But the message here, particularly to my students, I teach an intro class in policy, is that there's no one perfect indicator.
Right.
And especially in this kind of recovery that we're having, where it's sort of bifurcated, where you're seeing a 4% unemployment rate for college graduates, but a 12% unemployment rate for high school dropouts, right? You just can't rely on an unemployment rate. You have to look at what we call the labor force participation rate. That is the share of the civilian population that's either got a job or actively looking for a job.
So how do folks who are at home listening, what do we draw from these numbers, or what do we take away and say, okay, here's what I do?
Yeah. Well, I think as your previous guest intimated, that networking becomes so important here. Just the other week, the Bureau of Labor Statistics publishes what they call their job openings database, or results. And they estimated that last month there were about 3.7 million job openings. Okay? But we have 12 million people who are unemployed, who are actively searching. So that's a 4-to-1 ratio.
Sure.
So networking becomes very, very important in terms of volunteering becomes very important. For young college graduates who are facing a devil of a time getting jobs, internships, all ways to sort of get yourself inside the plant or the organization to where you can, when the economy does begin to really create jobs more.
You can take advantage
exactly.
of it. Are you seeing any policies that are forward-looking that you say, okay, this is going to help the situation? We see jobs growing in manufacturing in Georgia. We talked about that. And this new trade agreement with Colombia, a lot of jobs created by that. But what are you seeing in terms of policy that you can say to your students or to people who are watching, hey, this is a good thing, look out for this?
Sure. Well, over the last few years, I mean, the federal government and state governments have been trying to stimulate the economy. There was the American Reinvestment Recovery Act. In particular, it had a host of tax cuts in it for low and moderate income families. Basically, here the feeling is that large part of this problem is just the lack of consumption. People aren't going out and buying at the rates, at the levels that they were back in the late 1990s. Now, some question whether can and should we return to that level, because a lot of that consumption was driven by debt,
and that's what
credit card.
In the first place.
Exactly. So and now what's going to be interesting is the next administration is going to be faced with all of those tax cuts that had been in place, they're coming to an end.
Right.
And
end of this year, isn't it?
End of this year, exactly. Right. So there's new administrations that have to kind of feel their way through that. New Congress too.
There's a flip side of this coin too. Is the push for small business. Small business creates what, about 60–70% of the jobs in the U.S. Where do you see that taking place?
Yeah, I unfortunately, I am in the camp, and this is really an aggregate demand, a lack of consumption story, that you're not going to see employers en masse start to really hire workers to that 200, 300,000 per month range until consumer consumption really returns. Don't get me wrong, I think we should be providing stimulus, providing incentives to lower the cost of producing and creating companies for small businesses and moderate, medium, and large businesses. But I think it really lies in terms of it's a consumption problem.
Wow.
And then the other piece too is you have folks who are very concerned about our budget deficits and our debt going forward. I'm also in the camp that thinks that in the short term it's fine to run budget deficits because government spending is sort of not only the lender of government's not the lender of last resort, but it's also the sort of employer of last resort in many communities. And so one area I would like us to continue to work on and expand is summer youth. We're moving into our summers now, and particularly for minority youth, it's been shown the research that early employment opportunities are so key for educational achievement in terms of higher grades, completing a high school degree and going on to college, and
host of other things,
and building good job skills.
Hey, we could talk about this all day.
We sure could.
We're out of time, but thanks, Bill, for coming on board. Always insightful.
Thank you.